A few days ago, Sayadaw has been explaining how the samsara has been rotating. So the nama-rupa phenomena are arising continuously, just like a rotating fan. And Sayadaw had explained the cause and effect, and also explained the Paṇḍitā Sayadaw, dependent cause origination, in a brief way. If Sayadaw has to explain in detail, this Paṇḍitā Sayadaw has a lot of terminology, a lot of words that it would not be easy to understand. In previous days, Sayadaw explained that based on Kilesavada, based on the round of defilements, the Kamavada, round of good and bad deeds, will arise. And when there are Kamavada, good and bad deeds arising, there will also be Vipakavada, round of resultants. So the round of resultant consists of immediate results and the further results. And because there is the root of avijja, tanha, ignorance and craving, the kilesavada, round of defilements, arise again. And when there is kilesavada, round of kilesa, then kamavada, round of actions, arise. And due to kamavada, vipakavada, round of resultants, will arise. In this way, these three rounds will rotate continuously, just like a rotating fan. And in order to make it easy to understand, Sayadaw explained how the new generation of plants arise. So Sayadaw explained with this example of this rotation, or the rotation, and then how the new generation of plants are produced. So in these three examples, what is the main? Is the sap that is pervading the whole tree. If there is the sap, then the tree will grow, and the tree will give fruit and seed. And this fruit and seed will generate new generation of trees. So in order to stop the new generation of trees, one needs to cut off the sap, or one needs to stop the development of sap in the tree. In order to stop the development of sap in the tree, one needs to cut the supply of nutrients from soil, water, and air, so that sap cannot develop. So by cutting the nutrients, the supply of nutrients from soil, water, and air, and oxygen into the plant, then the sap will dry out and the tree will eventually die, so that it cannot give more fruit or more seed to generate a new plant. So in the same way, the human existence also has the cause of kilesa sap. So in order to cut the samsara, ground of existence, one needs to dry up the kilesa sap. In order to dry up kilesa set, one needs to practice the three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. By practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya, one can become free from this round of assistance. So it is called mochana, the cause for being free from the round of assistance. So by cutting or by abandoning the kilesa set, defilement set, then one will find his or her way out of the three rounds, the three vata, the three rounds. And Sayadaw said that he would be explaining the Four Noble Truths, but Sayadaw still needs to explain some more on this. And in Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, it is said that if kilesa vata, if this round of defilements is not cut, then the two other rounds, the Kamma vata and Vipaka vata, will continue to develop. So, in the example of the tree, if the set is not cut, if the set is not removed, or if one does not stop the development of the set, then the tree will grow, which will give fruit, which will give seed, which can develop, which can generate a new plant. So in the same way, if one cannot remove the kilesa set, then the karma, the good and bad deeds, will be done. And because of these karma, good and bad deeds, then vipaka, resultants, will continue to develop. So when this kilesa set is cut, then there will not be any gene that will generate further resultant of a tree. So in this way, when one can stop the development of kilesa set, then the other two rounds, Kamma vata, round of good and bad deeds, and Vipaka vata, round of resultants, will not continue to develop. So there will be question, what is making the connection, or what is making the rotation of these three rounds, and what can make the three rounds to be stopped. So the Eightfold Noble Path can make the three rounds stop. And if one does not develop the Eightfold Noble Path, then the three rounds will continue to rotate. So that there will be Kamma vata, good and bad deeds, and because of this Kamma vata, there will be round of resultant. And again, it also has this avijja tahna root, that's the root of craving, ignorance and craving, and it will further lead to more kilesa, more defilements to arise, and then kilesa will generate more good and bad deeds, and there will be more results. In this way, these three rounds will be rotating. So if one can remove the kilesa, then the Kamma vata, round of good and bad deeds, cannot continue, and also Vipaka vata, round of resultant, will also come to cease. So one has to remove this kilesa vata so that there will not be any new good and bad deeds. if there are not any good and bad deeds, then the resultant will also come to a stop. So how do we find the way out of these three realms? It is called mocana. It is the cause or the way out of the three realms. Today Sayadaw will explain on this topic. So just as the saying goes, if one cannot remove the kilesa, defilements, then good and bad deeds will be done. There will be more results. In this way, the three rounds will rotate if one cannot remove the kilesa, defilements. So if one does not develop the Eightfold Noble Path, then these three rounds will continue to rotate. So today in this talk, Sayadaw will explain briefly, and later on in the retreat, when the yogis have developed jnana, then Sayadaw will explain further. So most of you have heard about the Four Noble Truths. You have learned about the Four Noble Truths from books, and it is quite easy to know the definition of what the Four Noble Truths are. So whatever the nama-rupa phenomena that are arising, such as touching, knowing, seeing, hearing, so all these are dukkha satya, truth of suffering. So in the body, there is rising and falling of the abdomen. This is connected with the touching, and also bending, stretching, lifting, moving, placing, seeing, hearing. Everything is dukkha satya, truth of suffering. And just as Sayadaw had explained the other day about the receptor element, striker element, and the ignition element, all these three elements of receptor, striker, or the ignition, everything is called dukkha satya, truth of suffering. And the craving or being attached in whatever that arises is the origin of suffering. So this tanha, craving, is the origin of suffering. It is the truth of origin of suffering. So what should be done with the suffering? It is said that dukkham pariññeyam, one needs to discern this truth of suffering. One needs to discern this truth of suffering, not with imagination, but one should discern distinctly through one's own knowledge, through practice. And samudaya satyam pahatappam, it means that the origin of suffering, the tanha, the craving, should be abandoned. So one cannot abandon the craving that had arisen in the past, because it has already passed away, and the craving on the presently arising nama-rupa cannot be dispelled, and the craving that is to arise in the future cannot be abandoned because it has not arisen yet. And the craving that is arising at the present also cannot be abandoned. So what we mean by abandoning means we give no chance for the craving to arise. Giving no chance for the craving to arise is called abandoning the craving. So we should not give, or one should not give any chance for this Mudaya Satya, truth of the origin of suffering, the craving to arise. And the third one, Nirodha Satya, is the cessation of cause and effect. The cessation of all causes and all effects are called Nirodha Satya, truth of the cessation. And in other words, the cessation of the Mudaya Satya and Dukkha Satya, the cessation of the truth of suffering, cessation of the origin of suffering, is called Nirodha Satya, the truth of cessation of both the suffering and the origin of suffering. But to put it simply, the cessation of all suffering is called Nirodha Satya, truth of cessation of all suffering. So this Nirodha Satya should be realized. So one should realize this Nirodha Satya, truth of suffering. And Magga Satya, the truth of the path leading to cessation, should be developed. It is very important. So among the Four Noble Truths, one has to work on the first two, Dukkha Satya, truth of suffering, and Mudaya Satya, truth of origin of suffering. So by working on the first two, Dukkha Satya and Mudaya Satya, the latter two, Nirodha Satya and Magga Satya, will automatically be developed. So first of all, one should work on the first two Satya. In order to know the first two Satya, Dukkha Satya and Mudaya Satya, one needs to learn. It is called Uggaha. One needs to learn about the first two Satya. One needs to learn what are the Dukkha Satya. One needs to learn what are the truth of suffering. If one doesn't know, one should ask someone who knows. And one should also learn what is the Mudaya Satya, what is the origin of suffering. So in this way, one should learn the two Satya, Dukkha Satya and Mudaya Satya. And if one wants to know further of these two Satya, then one needs to listen to the way, what to do with the two Satya. And one should have dharana, one should bear and remember what they are and what you should do with them. So as a yogi, one should learn what are called the Dukkha Satya and Mudaya Satya. If you do not know, you can also ask the meditation teacher who you will be meeting in the interview. You need to listen attentively what the meditation teacher instructs you, and you should also follow the guidance of the meditation teacher. So if the meditation teacher stops you from doing something, you need to do according to what he says. And you need to learn carefully. And also, samasana, you need to be mindful and you need to reflect on these nama-rupa phenomena. So yogis are asked to note rising and falling of the abdomen. You should note in such a way so that your noting mind will be as if rubbing against the object of rising and falling of the abdomen. So this is what is meant by reflecting. So you should reflect it. It means that your noting mind should be on the object as if the noting mind is rubbing onto the object, so that your noting will be effective. So if you are able to note this way, you will understand what it is, how it is. So if your noting mind is rubbing against the object over and over again, you will understand what is the object, how the object is, and so on. So Sayadaw gives an example. When you are eating, if you are not mindful, you will not know the taste of the food. If you pay attention, and if you chew properly and pay attention, you will know the taste of the food. So if you chew something sweet, and if you are attentive, you will know the sweet taste. And if you chew something sour, the sour taste will come out, and if you are attentive, you will know the sour taste. In the same way, whatever object that arises, you should note with aiming, directing the mind, and you should put effort so that the mind will fall on the object of meditation. So whatever object that arises, you should note with aim and effort so that your noting will be effective and your noting mind will rub onto the object. So it is not just like reflecting in the mind or thinking, imagining in the mind, but you should note the object as if the noting mind is rubbing against the object of meditation. So in this way, the first two satya, dukkha satya and samudaya satya, the truth of suffering and the truth of origin of suffering, should be practiced. You should work on the first two satya. And the latter two, nirodha satya, the truth of cessation of all suffering, and the magga satya, the path leading to the cessation of suffering, you need to know the definitions, you need to know the quality of them. So it is sufficient to know the definition of this nirodha satya and magga satya. It is sufficient to know that they are the truth of cessation and the truth of the path leading to the cessation. You do not need to look for this magga satya and nirodha satya. But as you practice this Vipassana meditation, when your knowledge becomes matured, then you will realize the Nibbana with Magga Phala Jnana. You will realize the Nibbana by attaining this Magga Phala Jnana, path and fruition knowledge, and you will realize the latter two of the Four Noble Truths. So it means that this samudaya satya and nirodha satya are not the truth to be observed or to be noted. They are not to be observed, they are not to be noted, because these two satya have not arisen in yourself. They are called lokuttara satya. They are called supramundane truth. So it is sufficient to know what they are. It is sufficient to know that the nirodha satya is the truth of cessation of all suffering, and the magga satya is the path leading to the cessation. So it is sufficient to know like that. You do not need to do anything with them. So there can be craving on the object that arises because one does not know the flaws of the object. So not knowing the flaws of this object is called avidya, ignorance. And also one will take it as good. So one has this knowing. Oppositely, one thinks of it as good, which is really suffering. So in this way, there will also be ignorance, not knowing wrongly. Not seeing the flaws of the sensual pleasure is called apatipati avidya, and thinking the sensual pleasure as good, it is called mithya patipati avidya. So in this way, the ignorance avidya can arise. So not seeing the flaws of the sensual pleasure, there will be craving for these sensual objects, and there will also be clinging, grasping onto them, and also thinking that it is I who is feeling, who is experiencing the sensual pleasure. And in this way, there will be avidya, ignorance. So when there is ignorance, avidya, there is bound to be suffering. So it is the beginning of the suffering when there is avidya, ignorance, and craving, tasna. So in this way, avidya, ignorance, tasna, craving, and upadana, clinging, will arise. So in Abhidhamma, the origin of suffering is just craving. So in Abhidhamma method, craving, tasna, is the origin of suffering. So when there is this avidya root, when there is this ignorance root, the craving, tasna, will arise. And when the tasna craving becomes stronger and stronger in degree, there will be clinging and grasping, and it will be upadana. And based on this upadana, people do good and bad things. So if people do not know the truth of suffering, then they will take it as sukha, they will take it as good and happy. If they take this dukkha, suffering, as sukha, good and happy, then there will be craving onto these objects, and there will be clinging that it is I, and so on. So when there is craving, then the karma, the good or bad deeds will arise. So based on this craving, for the ones who do not have good intention, who have the bad intention, they will be doing unwholesome deeds. For the people who have good intention, they will be doing wholesome deeds. The wholesome deed that is called vaddhagami kusala, the wholesome deeds that can further lead to more suffering or more wrong. So in Abhidhamma method, the origin of suffering is craving. But in Suttanta method, the smudaya satya, origin of suffering, the truth of origin of suffering, consists of avidya, ignorance, tasna, craving, upadana, clinging, and karma, good and bad deeds. So in this Suttanta method, avidya, tasna, upadana, and karma are included in smudaya satya. So if one does not know the dukkha satya, truth of suffering, then avidya, tasna, upadana, and karma bhava will arise. And just as Saraji had explained using the example of sitting down, So in this sitting down process, there is a series of intention to sit, which is the cause, which is mentality. And if one does not note at the moment of arising, one will not know this intention to sit, which is the nama, which is the truth of suffering. And because of there is intention to sit, the actual sitting down takes place. The sitting down is the rupa, that is sitting down, the materiality, that is sitting down. It is also truth of suffering. So if one is not mindful, one will not know the intention to sit, the materiality, which is the truth of suffering, and the actual sitting down, the rupa, materiality, which is also truth of suffering. So not knowing it, it is apatipati avijja, ignorance, not knowing the truth. And also there will be knowing in the opposite way, that this nama rupa are good and happy. So in this way, having ignorance, not knowing the truth, there will be craving, and this craving is mudya satta, the origin of suffering. And when there is this avijja, not knowing, there will be craving, and one will have this clinging that it is I, and one will crave and cling even on this sitting process. So not being mindful, one will take it as it is I, or it is the person or being sitting down. And when there is this avijja, one will perform unwholesome deeds, and also wholesome deeds in the form of vattakami kusala. In this way, these cause and effect are arising. There is the origin of suffering, which is the cause, and the suffering, which is the effect. And if one does not know the truth, there will be avijja, there will be ignorance. So when there is avijja, ignorance, there is going to be dasna, craving. So if this avijja, ignorance is removed, then dasna, craving, will also be removed. When there is avijja arising, when there is this ignorance arising, then the dasna, the craving, will arise. And when this avijja arises, craving and all the other bad things will follow. So why does this avijja, ignorance, arises? It is because one is not mindful. If one is not mindful, there will be avijja, ignorance. Not being mindful on this dukkha satya, truth of suffering, at the moment of arising, then one does not know the truth. So there will not be samadhi. There will not be right view, but there will be avijja, ignorance, not knowing correctly, knowing oppositely. It is avijja, ignorance. So if one doesn't know, there is going to be craving. And when there is craving, there is going to be danger of suffering. By knowing, this craving will be abandoned. So how to abandon this craving? One should be mindful by this practice of Satipatthana meditation. One should put effort so that one will be able to note the presently arising object. By noting continuously with sustained mindfulness, there will be concentration, the mind will fall calm and collected on the object. The noting mind will be direct or face to face with the object, so that the yogi comes to know the true nature. For example, at the moment of sitting, when the noting mind falls on the intention to sit, then the yogi will come to know the mentality, the nama, which is the intention to sit. When the noting mind falls on the sitting down, the yogi is coming to know the materiality, the rupa, sitting down, and yogi knows the materiality as stiffness, tension, heaviness when sitting down. So knowing it correctly as the intention to sit and the actual sitting down, the rupa, the stiffness, tension, heaviness, and so on, in this way, one is coming to know the truth. It is just like the saying, dukkhe jnana. One is coming to understand this truth of suffering by being mindful at the moment of arising. If the person does not know the truth, there will be craving. But if a person knows the truth by being mindful, then one will not take it as something to be craved for. By discerning the nama rupa, mind and matter distinctly, one will overcome the wrong view of personality or self. So in this way, wrong view of personality or self is abandoned. So this wrong view has no chance to arise. So just as when the light arises, darkness is automatically dispelled. In the same way, when knowledge arises, this avijja, ignorance, will automatically be dispelled. So in place of ignorance, the knowledge will arise. So when this knowledge arises, then there will not be craving, there will not be clinging, there will not be doing bad deeds. So in this way, just by developing knowledge, by being mindful on the object, ignorance, craving, and clinging will all be dispelled. So that means by having knowledge, the samudaya satya, the truth of suffering, the craving, clinging will be dispelled. They will have no chance to arise. So in this way, there will be the danga nirodha, there will be momentary cessation. By being mindful at the moment of arising, yogi will develop knowledge. By developing knowledge, this avijja, tasna, upadana will be dispelled. So in this way, there will be momentary cessation of kilesa vata, momentary cessation of round of defilement. So when there is cessation of round of defilement momentarily, there will also be momentary cessation of kama vata, momentary cessation of this round of deeds. And when this kama vata comes to a momentary cessation, then vipaka vata, the round of resultant, will also be momentarily ceased. So in this way, there will be tatanga nirodha, momentary cessation. So momentary cessation will be realized. If you analyze this bhavana citta, there is this viriya, the effort to be able to know the object. This effort does not accept the kilesa defilement from entering into the mind. In this way, when there is this bhavana citta, viriya, the effort is present. When the yogi notes the object with sustained mindfulness, then the noting mind will fall calm and collected on the object. So in this way, when the yogi is able to note the object, viriya, effort, sati, mindfulness, and samadhi, concentration, will be present. So this viriya, sati, samadhi, the samadhi group of 3 is present. So when the noting mind is face to face with the object, then one will come to know the true nature. In this way, samadhi, right view, will be present. So in this way, the 2 of this panya group will also be present. And also the morality group, you already have this morality group by observing sila. So it is called cetana sila, morality in the form of volition. So in this way, the 3 from the group of sila is also present. So in this way, every time you are able to note the object, these 8 noble paths will be present. So this 8 noble paths is the preliminary path. The preliminary path that can lead to the noble 8 paths. So in this way, in this bhavana citta, every time you are able to note the object, these preliminary paths will be present. So in this way, just by knowing the true nature, by being mindful at the moment of arising, you are said to be discerning the dukkha satya. You are said to be discerning what is to be discerned. And also at the same time, you are dispelling or abandoning what should be abandoned, because you are also abandoning this tanha craving. And also you are said to be having this momentary cessation, what should be ceased, and at the same time you are also developing what should be developed, in this case the preliminary path. So in this way, just by being mindful, coming to know the true nature, you are said to be doing 4 things at a time. Discerning what should be discerned, abandoning what should be abandoned, ceasing what should be ceased, or realize what should be realized, and also developing what should be developed. In this way, it is 4 at a blow. You are said to be doing 4 things at once, just by being mindful, coming to know the truth. So it means that coming to know the truth by noting the presently arising object, you are said to be developing the full truth automatically. So this will be all for today. Sayadaw will continue to explain in his next Dhamma talk.